So welcome everyone to our series on transcending common spiritual obstacles. And the goal of this series is to really help you look at times when these kinds of obstacles have come up in your own spiritual journey, as well as the people that you're serving in whatever way that is, whether you're coaching or teaching or doing therapy or forest walks or writing books or whatever that may be. When we do outreach, we will invariably find other spiritual seekers who are going through some common spiritual obstacles. And today our topic is what happens when we question a higher power. And there are many, many terms that we could use. For the ease of this discussion, I'm just going to use the term God as a metaphor for that which is more expansive than one's human self. Personally, I like source, but there are, an endless amount of words that you could use to describe this. And the fact that some people don't believe that there is something much larger than themselves. So we're going to really dive into this topic today. It's really deep. It's very diverse. As I was doing the research for this, and in this, I don't intend to insinuate that God has any gender role or any other defining characteristic. With everything that we do here, it's all about you choosing your own beliefs. I'm just offering perspectives, right? I'm just offering perspectives. So let's talk a little bit about human beings' quest for answers. This is something that we do, it's just a part of our wiring. We want to know why. When we're a very young child, that's one of the first questions that we ask is why? Why this? Why that? Why does the world work this way? How come this happens? And when we talk about larger philosophical and spiritual questions, we ask a lot of questions that are why as well. And one of those is, what are our origins? How did we get here? And what is the purpose for a human life? Why are we here on this planet at this time? What are we supposed to be doing? And is there a divine plan to all of that? Or are things random? So we're going to kind of dive in to some of the big questions that you might run across in the study of spirituality with the clients that you serve. And just in modern culture in general, and with ancient teachings kind of tied in there as well. So one of the questions is, did our earliest ancestors crawl out of the primordial soup? Was everything sort of an ocean and we were single-celled organisms, and then we gradually became more complex? This is one of the theories that we have about our origins. Or were we created by the will of a presence, being, entity, much more advanced and conscious than ourselves? Were we seeded on Earth by extraterrestrials? There's lots of different philosophies about where did we come from? Why are we here? Are there others like us or not like us out there in the universe? Are we a part of a vast collective? Some people call it universal mind or universal heart or universal body. Or are we separate? I'm me and you're you, and we don't really have a connection. Do we have a soul? What is a soul? Is it eternal? Does it learn and evolve? Does our soul inhabit a human vessel once and that's it? We have one lifetime and then we die and then we're done. Or do we come back lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and we inhabit different personalities and different genders and different parts of the world? What if there's no deeper meaning to our lives? We're simply born, we live, we die, and then we decompose back into the earth, and and then it goes on from there. Some of the other questions are, if there is a higher power, is it benevolent or is it judgmental? Is it benevolent only to certain chosen people, or or does it love everyone? And why does this higher power allow bad things to happen? This is probably one of the biggest questions that people have, particularly people that are skeptics about whether there is some kind of higher power, God, goddess, source, universe. Why would a being create us and then allow bad things to happen? Is everything we do fated, destined, if you will? Or do we have free will? Or is it a combination of both of those things? And what I'll say is that these questions are important. They're relevant. They are something that almost every human being probably asks themselves at some point in their lifetime. So, it's normal and natural to ask these questions, to ask about our origins, to ask about our purpose, to ask about where we came from, and was there something that created us? Where are we going? And do we have free will? I think that's one of the things that most people are most interested in is everything written in the stars? Is my astrological stamp, if you will, at the moment of my birth, does that determine everything I'm gonna do, all the people I'm gonna meet, or is it completely random and I get to choose every single thing? And what I'll say about this is that the act of questioning starts to bring up all of the past belief systems that we may have learned either through our parents in our childhood, and maybe we participated in a particular religious or spiritual tradition as a young person, and those belief systems, those stories, those ideas were passed down to us. We get some of those beliefs and ideas from popular culture. We can read them in books. People have been writing about this since people chiseled on stone. And so there are many influences that could be out there, and we can tap into and really try to figure out what resonates, right? What resonates with me? Which of these beliefs feel good to me? Which of these things don't feel probable to me? Which of these things feel downright destructive to me? And that's really what the spiritual journey is about. Now, different people approach it differently. Some people want a certain answer. They want to believe in a specific set of doctrine or dogma, if you will. And other people, they want to be open-minded. And let me backtrack that. They want to be open about it. I don't want to be judgmental about anyone who decides that they want to believe a specific doctrine. What I want to do is say that some people choose to have it all fit kind of in a box and say, this is how it is, here's how it operates, here's what I believe, and here's what I think is true. Other people say, I don't really know, I don't even know if there's a box, and they choose to explore, right? And so there's different approaches to this. In any of my teachings, I don't want to try to imprint my own belief systems on anyone else. I think it's really important for people to choose their own path. But we have a historical context for all of this, right? Every culture throughout history has had its own origin stories. Some of those are very simple and some are extremely complex, right? Lots of layers of things of how the earth was created, how animals were created, how the universe was created, why we're here, our purpose. They're beautiful. They're amazing stories. And you can go back and you could look at any culture on earth through any period in history, and you can find these origin stories. And most of them also have an end of the world stories or end time story, when humankind will cease to exist, for one reason or another. It could be something like an apocalypse. It could be an asteroid hitting the earth. If you're talking about science, it could be lots of different ways that the earth will be destroyed. Humankind will cease to exist. And this is a place, that can bring up a lot of fear for people. Some people actually really embrace it. So there's a variety of reactions to these end of the world stories that we can trace throughout human history. Some human beings throughout history have believed in a variety of gods, a pantheon, if you will. And this is known as polytheism. right? So there's a few examples of that. Hinduism has multiple gods, Wicca, Druidism, animism, which is, the idea that the world is populated by spirits. And this is the tradition of many indigenous cultures, including Native Americans. Taoism, Shintoism, and of course the pantheon of gods that we probably have all studied from ancient Egypt, Rome and Greece. And so polytheism says that there are a variety of gods, and each of them has their own characteristics. They interact with each other. Some of the gods that interact with each other have very human-like characteristics, right? They are greedy, or they get angry, or they're vengeful, or they cheat on each other. There's lots of different interesting aspects to the stories in polytheism. But they also have stories, they have morals to these stories, which help to sort of create a mirror, if you will, for humankind, our own behavior, our own shadow self, our own strengths. And so each of the gods seems to have sort of a superpower, or more than one, and they also have sort of a weakness. And this is really a reflection of what it's like to be a human being. Some people throughout human history have believed in one God, known as monotheism. And they generally believe that their God is the right one, and everyone else's God is false, or it's just not a true teaching. And the earliest example of this is Zoroastrianism, but we also see Christianity and Judaism, Islam, Rastafarianism, Sikhism. And one of the things that I'll say is that monotheistic religions and spiritual traditions have been very beneficial in many ways to people. And on the shadow side of that, believing that your path is the only right path, there's often been examples in history where horrific violence has been enacted in the name of your God, or against another group of people's gods, or even persecution, for others who don't hold the same faith. And often it seems that in the more monotheistic religions, there's a tendency to try to proselytize and to bring people in and to convince them that this is the right way. Not all of them, but some of them do that. Some people throughout human history are highly skeptical, and they're opposed to the idea of a higher power. And this is often referred to as atheism. They're often very vocal about how believing in something supernatural beyond our human experience is an illusion. It's simply people fooling themselves. And you can go out on any social media platform that is related to this, and you can see lots of topics. And some of the arguments get a little divisive and they get a little nasty, to be honest with you. But there's a benefit to exploring atheism. And I did that for a while in my own journey. I was very, very sort of more traditionally religious as a child. And then I went to college and I explored atheism, and I was like, well, what would happen if I just didn't believe at all? What if I thought, well, that's just silly. That doesn't even, it can't even be possible that there's a higher power or a god or a goddess or anything. So there's a benefit to that. There's a benefit to like rejecting something completely out of hand, to kind of see it from the other angle, if you will, the other perspective. And then we have agnostics, which are people who believe that nothing can be known of the existence or nature of God, or anything beyond the earthly plane, the material phenomena, that what we have right here, everything you can see, smell, taste, touch, is all there is. It's an interesting question, but to an agnostic, it's sort of irrelevant. It's like, you can never prove it. It doesn't matter. Why are we even talking about it? And the scientific method is kind of rooted in the energy of agnosticism, because what they're doing is presenting a theory and then testing it out in the real world with evidence that they can actually see, hear, record, put into some quantitative data. Scientists can hold additional spiritual beliefs beyond agnosticism, but at its core, science is really more of an agnostic pursuit. And then throughout history, there have been human beings who have self-deified, essentially declaring themselves a god who is embodied on earth. Or if they didn't, their followers declared them as that status. So we begin to look at the Egyptian pharaohs, and you see that, you know, the pyramids, they believe that the pyramids were developed as a tomb. There's many theories about what the pyramids are for, but they were developed as a tomb for the pharaoh god, so that they could move on to the afterlife and live there forever. And so there were many other cultures, the Chinese, the Japanese, and Incas in South America, who also followed this sort of idea that whoever was the ruler of the culture of the community at the time was both human and God at the same time. We see this with Jesus Christ in the biblical tradition. We see this with Adolf Hitler, and I'm not by any means associating Jesus Christ with Adolf Hitler, but I'm talking about all the times when there has been a human being on earth who has come and either themselves or someone else has said they are God, right? They are God. Even George Washington, the first president of the United States, there's actually a mural in the US Capitol in the dome of him ascending into heaven and becoming a god for his service to this country, which is really interesting and kind of talks a little bit about the mentality that we have here in America. Let's talk about the blues musician, John Coltrane, right? This was a really obscure thing that I discovered in doing this research, but he had a series of followers in San Francisco, California. And when he passed away, they actually changed the church's name to St. John Coltrane African Orthodox Church. So this is the only church in the world that incorporates John Coltrane's music and his lyrics as part of their teachings and their prayers and their liturgies in their formal rituals. We could look at someone like Jim Jones, who was the founder of the People's Temple, which started off kind of as a mainstream Protestant denomination and then, you know, devolved into a personality cult, right? And a cult is where people really, they follow a particular leader. The leader is really the guru. They are the end all be all. What they say is how it is. And people really kind of give up a lot of their own personal autonomy, their ability to ask questions, in order to just believe, like a blind faith, really is what I would call it. And this temple was best known for its a really horrific event, a mass suicide and mass murder of his followers in 1978. 909 people died at the settlement in Jonestown. And what they did is they were told that, you know, if they committed suicide, they drank this poison that was in the drink there, that they would live forever, right? And they would receive all of these, you know, spiritual abundance and spiritual gifts. And so the term drinking the Kool-Aid, like swallowing anything that someone tells you to your own, you know, ill will, to your own detriment, is a reference to that event. And then there's one more, you know, one more interesting example that I wanted to give you. In Japan, there is a man named Rahuyu Okawa. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he's the founder of Happy Science, whose followers worship a deity named Alcantara, who they believe is the Lord of all gods. And they believe that this being was first born on Earth 330 million years ago. And it is the same entity that has been worshipped at different times in the form of Elohim, Odin, Thoth, Osiris, Hermes, and Buddha. And they believe that their founder is the current modern incarnation of that deity. So then we get to the question, after we look at, I mean, there are just thousands and thousands of these examples. Which of these beliefs is true, right? Which of these beliefs is true? By estimate, there are 4,200 different religious and spiritual philosophies across the world. And this number continues to expand as more people maybe move away from something they had traditionally believed and create their own belief or develop their own mystery school, or they develop their own following. I would say that most people are probably aware of maybe 5 to 10 of these spiritual belief systems. So you can imagine that we have no idea about the level of diversity with humans' belief systems in relation to God or goddess or universe or source. But what I would say, and this is just my own personal belief, that if there's 4,200 different versions, and maybe they have some similarities, but it's most likely there cannot be just one belief that is true while others are not. I mean, it's just so much diversity, so many different ways of looking at the same thing. And in reality, all of the people who believe in whatever they believe, whether they believe in a higher power, they don't believe in a higher power, they don't know if there's evidence, we're all wanting to understand the same thing. You know, how did we get here? Why are we here? What is the meaning for our life? What is the purpose? What am I supposed to do? Do I have free will? And if I do, then, you know, what kind of responsibility does that put on me? These are the fundamental questions that 4,200 different spiritual traditions are trying to answer. And you might think, well, you know, is it useless to even try to answer something which may be completely unknowable, right? Because, I mean, really, unlike science, where we can say, take a pen and we could drop it and we know that there's gravity, at least on this planet. We don't know that gravity works the same on every planet. I don't believe it does, according to science. Why would we continue to ask these questions if we can't prove anything, right? And what a lot of traditions call it is the great mystery. It's the great mystery, right? It's really exciting. It feels like something we need to solve, but we may not be able to. As a matter of fact, we probably won't, right? Because no one can really prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is a God, a goddess, a great spirit, source, Allah, Yahweh, or Zeus, you know, any of them. And this is where the concept of faith enters in. So most traditions define faith as trusting in something you cannot explicitly prove. And many formalized spiritual and religious beliefs ask people to take things on faith. They say, we know you can't see it. We know you can't taste it. We know you can't smell it. We're asking you to believe. We're asking you to believe, right? And this is the foundation of most spiritual and religious belief systems. It asks their believers, their followers, to trust, right? To trust that this is the word of God, that this is the tradition that's been passed down for thousands of generations, that this is something that we know intuitively, whatever the reason is and however they receive that. Some of these teachings are channeled through a specific person or a group of people. And the way that people express this faith, this belief, this trust, some people cling to it at all costs, right? It is the most important thing. You know, my faith is the center of my life is a phrase that you'll hear used in the spiritual and religious communities. Some people reject faith altogether. They're like, if I cannot physically see it, if I cannot have proof of it, I just don't believe it exists. And other people seem kind of secure, right? They're like, well, this is what I know right now. It may change in the future, but this is what I know right now, and it works for me, right? So there's a wide range of how much people can dive in to a faith-based belief. Now, let's talk about when either you or one of your clients or someone you know in your life questions the existence of a higher power. And if a person does this publicly, there's a risk, right? There's a risk. They might feel guilty internally because some faith traditions say you have to believe or you're going to hell, you have to believe or you're out of the community. So there's a lot at risk to question, right? When we dare to do that, it felt very risky for me after growing up for many years as a Christian and, you know, going to church every Sunday and being very involved in the youth organization of the church and all those things, it felt very daring and risky for me in college as a 20-year-old to say, well, what if that is all bullshit? What if none of that was even true? And I didn't tell a lot of people that I was doing that questioning. I only talked to people that I thought would have been open-minded to that, would have allowed me to do it without a lot of guilting, shaming, or making me feel like I was going to go to hell for asking those questions, right? And being kicked out of your spiritual community could be traumatic. You know, there's a lot of people, and in another segment of this series, we will talk about, you know, what happens when someone feels like they've gone through spiritual abuse, that they've been so controlled or dominated by the faith that they either, you know, were brought up in or, you know, found as an adult that, you know, they finally had to just leave because it wasn't working and it was harmful to them. And this is a really serious thing. And the reason that people, I think, want to have their faith be the true one is so that they can feel that certainty, so they can feel good about themselves, so they can feel like, I know what I'm doing here. The reason we ask all these questions is because we don't know what the hell we're doing. Right? We're showing up every day. We're doing the best we can. We're learning, we're growing. And what we face every single day is uncertainty. We can make a plan, but unexpected things happen all the time. And so for some people, having that faith and knowing that this is exactly the doctrine I believe in actually gives them a sense of security. For other people, it feels like a prison. It feels like stifling, right? But what I'll say is that I believe that pretty much every person on earth is going to question the presence of God at some point in their life, whether they question their existing beliefs, they question something they hear on TV, they question something someone tells them, a friend, they're going to question. And there's a variety of reasons why that questioning might arise. If someone just went through a really traumatic and painful event that seemed to have no reason and no justification, you know, this is a really hard one. You know, like, why would I get cancer? Why would my child pass away at age 1 for no reason? You know, these are sometimes the things we face as human beings, and we have no idea why it happened. And so when it does, we might say, well, I don't think there is a God. You know, a God wouldn't allow this thing to happen. Maybe they spent, you know, years, and I'm in this camp, wondering, why do such horrific things happen to good or innocent people? Why do we have wars on this planet? Why do we, you know, kill each other? Why do we, you know, do these things? If there was a benevolent power, like, why would it let that go on? You know, and that was a part of my questioning that I did when I was in my early 20s. Can't it intervene? Can't it change things? I mean, if it was so immensely powerful to be able to create a planet, can't it actually help a person like be more loving? You know, what's going on here, right? Some people have even postulated that we are a cosmic science experiment, or like a science fair project for a much larger being that's, you know, just seeing how things work out. Let's try this, let's try that, and just see what happens. So these are some of the questions that arise, right? You know, why, if we are divine beings at our core, why is it when we're born, we then forget our true origins? You know, why is our entire process perhaps here on this planet through our lifetime to awaken to our divine origins? You know, of what benefit is the forgetting process, the awakening process? So these are all these questions that we ask. And again, it's normal. It's normal to ask these questions, but a lot of our society and a lot of religious and spiritual communities and leaders do not make it safe to ask those questions. I remember being in Sunday school when I was a child, and I was always that person that raised my hand. I was like, wait a minute, there's a contradiction. It's like on page 45, it says this, but on page 68, it says something different. Which one is it? And I could just see the Sunday school teacher was like, you know, but we don't make it safe. So if there's something that you can do when a person comes to you, to create a safe environment for them to ask these questions, because they are just human questions. They're just the meaning of life is something that everyone is questioning and asking about and wondering about and seeking. So we shouldn't make it a shameful thing, a guilt-based thing, or even a painful thing. But often it is. And so it's important to be able to cultivate and hold that sacred container for others. And, one of the things that almost every spiritual belief system incorporates is the idea of surrender, right? Some people believe you must surrender your life to a higher power. It or they or God, whatever it is, has a plan for you, and your role is to follow that plan. And there are many people throughout many spiritual and religious traditions that believe this. Some believe that our goal here is to keep surrendering our ego self, our human personality, right? The part of ourselves that gets jealous and angry and bitter and wants to get revenge and all these kinds of, more dense vibrations, so that our soul, which is the eternal self, can be the navigator of our lives. The soul sees the big picture. It's like, here's your spiritual path, not only maybe in this lifetime, but if you believe in other lifetimes. And then the ego is the one that implements the soul's guidance in the earthly plane. So this is another belief system. And some believe that surrender is accepting what is right now in this moment, instead of trying to make it be something else. And this is often called non-attachment or unattachment. And it is probably one of the hardest things that we struggle with as human beings. We tend to live a lot in the past and a lot in the future, but being present is really challenging, right? It's really challenging to be present. And surrender is one of the most difficult states for human beings, because we do all kinds of things to try to control everything and everyone around us, because we want to be certain. We want to know what's happening. We want to know why it's happening. We want to know what our place is, what our role is, what we're supposed to be doing. So we do all these things to try to control, right? We want to be right. We want to be right. Because if we're not right, we must be wrong, right? And someone else is right, and they're getting something over on us, and they're better than us, or they're more enlightened than us. I mean, these are the things that we do, right, in this process. Not knowing activates that fear response, and not being right activates that fear response. However, even if we will never find an answer to the question, is there a God, and why are we here, and what's our purpose? There is a benefit to exploring these questions. It sparks our imagination. It lifts us out of our day-to-day existence. And, it's, it kind of aligns us with our humanity, right? This is one of the core essences, probably in addition to what happens after we die, which is one of the things we haven't talked about, is one of the biggest questions that all human beings face. Right? It's one of the things that we all face. So it actually connects us together in a way. And as I said, I believe that questioning God is healthy, it's normal, and I believe it should be encouraged, actually. I know it's not in a lot of circles, but I think it should be. And I think that we can decide as spiritual leaders that we are open to allowing people, not just allowing people, but encouraging them to have these questions, to explore that for themselves. So if you have a client or friends or family or an acquaintance who share that they are questioning, please be supportive of them. I would affirm that it's okay to ask questions. It's even okay to be skeptical. And most important is it's okay if you or them change your mind. We can believe one thing right now, and if new information presents itself in the future, you can choose to believe something else. What allows us to surrender, and this is my opinion, is that there is no universal truth. There are only the perceptions, the interpretations, and beliefs of individuals and groups. And those can be really healthy, or they could be really destructive. We also get to choose what that looks like as well. And it's fine to believe in what feels aligned for you providing we're not hurting anyone else with that belief system. It kind of leaves us at the golden rule. Treat others the way that you would like them to treat you.